We can begin the meeting since you have all members present, if everybody's comfortable with that. And I begin the meeting because this is a board reorganization. You don't have a board chair at the moment.
Right on time, that's great.
What's that?
Right on time, let's do it.
Okay. So the first order of business is for me to open the nominations for the position of Williston Board Chair for the, what are we in, 16-17 school year?
I'd like to nominate Kevin Mara.
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? All those in favor of having Kevin serve as board chair for the following year signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Gee, thanks.
The gavel and microphone are yours.
Great, so let's continue and seek nominations to fill vice chair, clerk, assistant, and assistant board clerk. So if you have any questions as we go through here around responsibilities, just stop and we'll talk it through. Otherwise, let's start with vice chair. Do we have a nomination for vice chair?
I nominate Josh Diamond for vice chair.
I'll second that. Any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor for nominating Josh as vice chair?
Aye.
Signify with aye.
Aye.
Did I get an aye?
Yeah, you're good.
All right, now it skips out. It skips out on the ayes. Great, thanks. Okay, so for the position of clerk, can we have a nomination for someone to assume the position of clerk?
Hey,
Like-
Kevin, can I ask what the clerk and the assistant clerk do?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to field that?
Sure, anybody. I just,
Because I'm probably going to be Peggy and I are going to be the primary interfaces with the clerk.
Okay.
The board is required to approve director's orders each month, in essence approving all disbursements made from the district.
Okay.
The clerk comes in and reviews those as they're presented by Peggy, your bookkeeper.
okay.
You as the clerk sign off on them, and then you as a clerk make a recommendation for approval to the full board at their next meeting.
Okay.
So the duties would be, in essence, to come into the business office at Williston at least once a month, if not twice a month, and review orders so Peggy can move bookkeeping forward. And you get to ask Peggy any questions you have to better understand what has to be paid regularly to keep the board in operation.
Okay. And then what's the assistant do?
The assistant is the second name on the list when the clerk isn't here. Peggy has someone to call, because there's someone calling her to get checks out.
Okay.
So the checks don't get released until the clerk has authorized their release.
I see.
The actual approval of director's orders occurs many times after the checks are released, but after the clerk has okayed them. So it'd be a good position for someone who wants to understand a little better of the day-to-day finances of the district. It wouldn't necessarily be a good position for a person who wants to second-guess everything that Greg and I are doing on a weekly basis. Have I done that okay, Greg?
Well, and I've been the assistant clerk for this past year,
Yeah.
and
It
I've
was well said too.
I think I've gone in maybe 4 times when Giovanna, who was the clerk, was unable to go in and sign.
That's great. I
Yeah.
didn't clarify. That's perfect.
So I would like to nominate Karen Macklett for the position of clerk.
Second.
Great, do we have a second?
Second.
Great, thank you. Any other nominations?
None?
Okay, hearing none, all in favor of Karen Macklett for clerk, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Very good, thank you very much. And then the assistant board clerk, and I think we've explained it pretty well here, this would be a great opportunity for someone to learn as they go. Do we have any nominations for the position for assistant board clerk?
Amanda, based upon your inquiry, do you have an interest?
Yes, I have an interest.
All right, and I'd like to nominate Amanda Martin.
I'll second.
it.
Excellent. Any other nominees? Nominations? Great. Hearing none, all in favor of appointing Amanda as the assistant board clerk, please signify with aye.
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 Excellent. Okay, so now we have other appointments we need to make. If you are looking at your agenda, there's a number of things that we need to do. We need to assign to folks in order to kind of keep business running here. So the first priority is we as Williston Williston appoint 3 representatives to the SU board. The representation is by demographics, so based upon the amount of students we send into the SU, we're allowed to appoint 3 members from this board. Last year it was Josh, myself, and then Karen took over at some point through 3rd, I think. She took over Giovanna's place. So I guess the best way to approach this is perhaps have a quick discussion about whether or not there's interest from new parties or if there's old parties that may not want to do it again, so that we just understand where everybody is on it.
Kevin, if I may just add, one of the most important aspects of the CSSU board is the relationship between that board and the superintendent. So the superintendent is the CEO, the president, if you will, of this operation. And it's the CSSU that hires and provides oversight over that position, not this board. So it is an important board. It does many other things, but organizationally, that may be one of the more important aspects of it.
Thank you.
And Kevin, from my understanding, the board chair is one of those 3 positions, right? Our board chair is one of the 3 CSSU reps on the board?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have 2 others besides the board chair.
Yeah, I guess, Bob, I defer to you on whether that's policy or if it's just tradition, so to speak, but it certainly seems that most boards have their board chair as one of their reps.
Yes, policy is a little too strong, but tradition is a little bit too weak. Somewhere in between those 2 words is.
Well, I'm interested in doing it anyway,
Okay.
so.
I would do it as a new member.
I would too.
And while I've historically sat on that board, I'm willing to step back to allow others the opportunity.
Karen, do you want to do it again?
Great, so.
I can go either way.
Well, it might make sense to have 2 existing board members on it and then 1 new person for continuity.
Yeah.
So I'm fine to step down if you want to do that, Amanda.
I'm also, if you want
That's
to.
up to you.
So should we
Flip
flip
a
a coin
quarter,
amongst
yeah.
the 2?
Okay, so do we have a slate?
Well, I think it's you, Kevin, Karen, and then either Amanda or Brandon.
You can pick.
Great. Bob, just as a point, do we need to vote on these appointments, or are they just?
Yes, this is the essential thing you need to do before tonight's meeting at 7 o'clock.
Well, all right, I guess we should probably do it right then.
Probably no.
Okay, so can I have a motion for, I guess, who we got, myself and, is it Karen and Amanda? Is that how I heard correctly?
Yes.
Sure. Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So I hear
Second.
so moved. In a second?
Josh seconded it.
Okay, thanks. I guess, having no other nominations, all in favor signify with aye.
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 Okay, we have our CSSU board representatives, policy committees. So, Bob, it might be easier if you explain what the role is for policy committee, just because it's easier than me talking to you.
Okay, policy is developed within CSSU and its member schools by a group that meets across school boundaries, having membership from each of the school boards and then membership from administration. The policy committee debates, discusses, and presents policies to the full board for adoption or for consideration and then adoption over a course of a kind of a 2-month sequence. I believe the policy committee tries to meet at least monthly. Whoever signs up for it really should be committed to attending because it doesn't really do much for the work of the committee if seats are vacant each time you meet.
And one thing to add to that, Bob, when they tend to meet at 8 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday. Their next 2 meetings are Wednesday mornings, and then one, I think, was a Tuesday morning. But it is 8 to 9 in the morning, I believe, if that impacts your decision. Because at the time, it doesn't really work for me.
Who is the current policy committee?
I believe it was Kevin Brochu, so this is now an open
Open
position.
seat, okay.
Do we have anyone with interest?
The hours make it impossible for me to serve on that committee, so.
Same here.
I can do it if nobody else can. I can make it work. It's hard because of the time, but it's not impossible.
I mean, I'd prefer that someone else do that, because I'm already doing a lot of other things on the board.
Okay.
So if we could, you know, I mean, if we could all have a responsibility on the board of some of these things, I think that's ideal, that we're all involved in some way in addition to the board meetings. So, so I wish there was some other way, Brendan, that we could, you know.
I could do some, if it's just every month would be tough. but-
I think that, I don't know that is it every month, Sandy?
Pretty much.
Pretty much?
Yeah.
I can do it. And then if you wanted, I can tell you when they are if you want to come.
Yeah.
I'm interested in doing it. It's just, it would be tricky until the fall when there's a different preschool schedule. But in the fall, it shouldn't be too hard, and there are only 2 or 3 more meetings before then. So,
So good, can we share, can we have 2 people and make sure that we have coverage by our board?
I think that's fine.
okay, that works for me. Yeah.
Great, so I think what we want to do then is perhaps nominate a primary and an alternate. Would that be appropriate?
so
Yes.
I nominate Brandon with Amanda as the alternate.
Second.
Okay. Hearing no other nominations, all in favor, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay, negotiations committee, so
Kevin, can I interrupt?
you sure can.
Cindy has advised me that you need not do that tonight. Right at the moment, you don't have a need for a negotiations committee, and long prior to you needing one, she will bring to your attention the need to name somebody. So you can skip over that one tonight.
Sounds good, we'll do so. So this brings us to the facilities subcommittee. This is a committee that this board has tasked with taking a look at the facilities needs for our buildings, and specifically Wilson Central School. This committee has been in process since, well, I guess late last year, if not even earlier. Currently, myself and Josh are representatives from the board on this subcommittee. I'm interested in continuing. Josh, I'll throw it to you whether you want to continue or
Yeah,
you want to.
yes, I'd like to see this through, so.
Is anyone, unless anyone else has interest, I just assume take the nominations and move forward.
Okay, I nominate Kevin and Josh.
I second.
Great. Was there a second there? I might have skipped out.
Amanda.
Yeah, I second.
Okay. Hearing no other nominations, all in favor, please signify with aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, FAPAC rep. This currently is held by Karen, and it's pretty straightforward. It's the board's representative to the FAPAC. Karen, do you want to speak at all about it, and whether you still have interest?
I'm happy to, you know, continue to serve in that role. I know Amanda's also on FAPAC, but is also going to be taking on a role there. And so I don't know if she wants to, you know, but I'm happy to do it, and we could do the same thing, do an alternate. Or if Brendan, you know, it's Thursday mornings once a month from 8:15 to 10, basically.
That sounds good.
It's really up to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
can I have a nomination?
Who wants to be the lead?
I'm happy to be the lead, and
Okay.
People know her as like the
I
contact.
nominate Karen for the lead with Amanda as backup.
Second.
it'll be
Excellent.
my last year with Williston, so.
Hearing no other nominations, all in favor, please signify with aye.
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 Great. Technology committee. This is an interesting one because I don't know if that committee has met in a while. Is this a necessary appointment?
I don't have one. The signal I get is no, it's not necessary. You can move over that one too.
Very good. So that leaves us with the in-process CSSU Act 46 Study Committee. Currently, Karen and myself represent, in concert with Jean Jensen and Dean McHugh. Jean McHugh is currently on the CVU board as a representative from Williston, and Jean recently stepped down from her position on the CVU board. However, it's my recommendation anyway that unless there's, concern about this, that we continue to keep the same people in this position until the committee finishes their work sometime in the mid-June timeframe.
I don't think we can change the committee members, can we,
I think,
of the study committee?
I guess it's a good question, but since we're here and we're a new board and we have to reorganize, I think at the very least we have to reaffirm as this board that these are the people we want to continue representing us.
I think given the, I agree with the recommendation for, I think, what seem to be obvious reasons. Your work is almost wrapped up, and there's going to be follow-through needed, so I would support the reaffirmation.
I second. Is that you making the motion?
Okay, great. So, hearing no other nominations, all in favor of continuing to have myself, Karen, Jean Jensen, and Jean McHugh represent us on the Act 46 committee, please signify with aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, we have a board and committees. So let's move on to item 3, adjustments to the agenda. I know we have a number of them. We will continue right after this with audience and communications.
Well, Kevin, I'd like to make a,
The audience and communications is for matters that are not on the agenda. So if there's something that audience cares to speak about as we go into discussion a little bit later here, we'll take that input at that time. And the other thing that we asked from audience communications is that there is a sign-up sheet that I believe is over by Josh or Brandon. We ask that you sign up and so that we know who's addressing us and vice versa.
So-
Other than that, in the interest of time, we may ask you to limit your comments to no more than a few minutes. We do have to stop by about 6:40 this evening because we have a follow-on meeting at the SU level, but I think we'll be just fine. I just wanted to lay out the rules.
so Kevin, I just want to get clarification because I suspect we've got a number of members of the public looking to discuss the professional development calendar.
Yep.
You're going to give members of the public the opportunity to comment following that discussion.
So my recommendation is that we switch 6.0 and 7.0 and that we start with discussion matters this evening and do reports to the board after. And that way we will, we'll take public input on anything outside of discussion, but our first discussion matter will be the professional development calendar. If everybody's agreeable, then we will be able to, put the issue in front of the public sooner.
I guess I would like members of the public the opportunity to comment after the discussion or in conjunction with the discussion of that item. So as long as, I think we're talking about the same thing, but I'm not.
Yeah. So I think, from a protocol standpoint, Josh, I understand. So I think what we'll do is we as a board will have our discussion. The public can listen to that discussion and then comment afterwards. Is that what you're suggesting?
Or in some manner like that, yes.
Well, unless there's any,
I had a couple other adjustments to the agenda.
Likewise.
So,
no, let's just close this one point up. Does anyone on the board disagree with having the discussion as a board and then opening it up to public right after that?
no.
Okay, so that's how we'll do this. So let's move on. I know that there's a couple requests. Otherwise, I have no other adjustments myself, but I believe that a few of you want to take some things out of consent.
Yeah, I'd like to take the policy adoptions out of consent.
Okay, so that's 9.3.1 and 9.3.2, Josh?
Yes.
Okay, Karen?
I'd like to take 9.3.4, the newspaper of choice, and the 9.3. or 9.5, whatever, out of appointment of truant officer out of the consent agenda, mostly just to have a little discussion on them separate from just approving it as a package, so.
That's fine. So we'll move those up to 8.2, 8.3, and 8.4 under action. Great. Do we have any other requests for adjustments to the agenda? Okay. So let's move on to audience and communications. Do we have anybody in the audience who'd like to speak up about any other issues other than the proposed calendar changes?
There is someone, Kevin.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
If you could
My
stand,
daughter-
if you could stand.
oh yeah, sure. My previously outspoken daughter. So this is this is because Maggie's teacher, Miss Ford, was let go. And I know part of it has to do with the fact that we are having less enrollment right now. And another part of it has to do with the fact that Act 46 has put some restrictions on our budgets. So I just want to kind of quickly express my thoughts about this. I come from a family of teachers, so I actually moved to Williston from Colchester because we have some of the best schools in the state as far as I'm concerned. My husband's also a teacher. My mother was a teacher of 3rd and 4th graders for many, many years in New York State, and my brother teaches 8th grade English in Guilderland, which is a suburb of Albany. So I talked to my brother about the fact that Miss Ford was being let go, and he said this is a slippery slope. Since 2010, when New York began these tax caps, shortchanging public education, his district alone, which is about the same size as ours, lost more than $21.2 million, this is since 2010, in promised state aid, and had to cut more than 227 full-time staffing positions. And I'm concerned about this because, yes, today we're cutting one teacher position, half of a PE position, some custodial positions, but what happens next? When will it stop? And in my opinion, when you shortchange our children's education today, you shortchange their futures and the future of our society. And I don't want to be New York. We're Vermont. Like, we're better than that. So Maggie's not going to say what she wanted to say, but I'll say it for her. I'm going to read what she wrote last night. My name is Maggie, and my teacher is Mrs. Ford. I was sad when she told us she had to leave. I don't think it's fair that she only gets to teach at Williston Central School for only 1 year. I don't think teachers should have to go on budget cuts. Mrs. Ford is an awesome teacher. I'm worried about next year. I will have a new teacher, and I will be separated from my friends because, of course, they're not replacing Miss Ford, so all 19 kids get to go to different teachers. I wish that Mrs. Ford didn't have to go. And Maggie Lawrence was to give this speech because teachers are important to her. And what I ask of the board is, can we in the future be a little more transparent and let the parents know when these talks about cutting teachers come up? Because we all work, we're busy, some of us stay at home and work at home. People who stay at home and work at home are just as busy as those of us who are at work. We can't always make every single board meeting. We will try to now in the future, but we can't always. And it would be helpful if, when there was talk about cutting teachers, cutting staff, Act 46, if we could have some kind of notification that would say, hey, you might want to be coming to this meeting because we're going to talk about something that's going to affect you directly and affect your children. I'm really not happy about the decision to cut Mrs. Ford. She's an excellent, excellent teacher. She's done a great job. And that's all I have to say, really. I think this is the wrong move. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who wants to speak on any other issue besides the professional development calendar?
One more, Kevin.
One more.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So just maybe, I mean, I'm not sure why we're not talking about drawing a blank, but the schedule for the kids in terms of the Tuesday afternoon, that's gonna
That's
be
later.
discussed.
We're gonna talk about that later.
Okay. So then just a very straightforward, simple thing, which sort of touches on what my neighbor mentioned, is I don't know why we're in Heinsberg, right? I like to attend the meetings, I'm sure more people like to attend the meetings. Why are we in Heinsberg? It doesn't make any sense, it's a 30-minute drive, 25-minute drive. So I don't wanna say we're doing this so that less people attend, but I could say that. Why are we in Heinsberg? It's a Williston School District meeting, shouldn't be here. We should be 5 minutes from my house, 5 minutes from my else's house. That's my view. There's probably some other reasons, I know that. Maybe you'll tell me, but I really think this should not be here. It should be close to your constituents. Thanks.
Kevin, would you like to respond to that?
Sure, go ahead.
I just, I sympathize with the statements you've made. We're part of a CSSU, and I'm not trying to justify it, I'm just trying to provide an explanation. But these meetings happen in conjunction with the CSSU. And because Heinsberg seems to be the focal point with the high school here, this has been the compromise position where we all come to meet and to have follow-up board meetings instead of 2 separate days and evenings. We try to do it in one combined swoop. But I hear your comments and appreciate them.
Sure. And I don't want to get, but so I thought it was a separate board for the CSSU board, or is there?
Those board members are all comprised of the board members from the local school districts.
One of the school district people? Oh, okay. Yep.
Okay. Great. Any others? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to our discussion items.
One more.
One more.
So I know that we're going to speak about it sounds like we're going to speak about the proposed schedule changes later, and I'm not going to get a chance to be here. I'm in a different board meeting. It's a little bit awkward that I'm here, being that I work at CVU. I'm also a Williston parent, and I normally wouldn't come and jump out of my own board meeting. I'm pretty passionate about this topic, so I won't say anything now. I'm just hugely in favor and a big proponent both from a parent's point of view, and I won't put my school hat on because that's not fair to do. But when you speak about it, if I'm able to get out of my meeting, I will. So, thanks.
Great.
Thank you. Okay. So we're moving to discussion items. Discussion matters. We'll leave it as 7.0, even though we'll do it before 6. 7.1 professional development calendar. There was some read-ahead materials that were in your board packet. Greg, I think it's probably appropriate if I pass over to you the ball, so to speak, and let you open this discussion up.
Sure. Well, as was written in the pre-read materials, subcommittee of the lead group. Lead group's made up of all the principals in the supervisory union as well as the CSSU administrators. Was formed to look at our professional development model and to really come up to make sure that the model in which and the schedule in which we're providing professional development for teachers matches the needs. Matches the current needs in the professional learning that we're engaged in and in the student needs in terms of learning. So essentially, after the work that subcommittee did, they've are proposing that a shift be made from 4 single full-day non-student days during the school year that are interspersed throughout the school year, some in the beginning, some in the middle, some near the end. Again, these are non-student days, but teachers report and receive professional development. So the shift that's being proposed is a shift away from that to a weekly chunk of time that would be placed adjacent to a staff meeting day, and provide, although it's a 1-hour release early for students, it provides staff with a 2-hour span of time weekly to engage in professional learning and professional work. So in replacing the, so also part of the proposal is to put back 3 student days where those professional development days were. So there will be additional student days and to help compensate for the 1 hour a week of early release. Essentially what the committee found, and what I'm in strong agreement with, is that the type of learning that we're doing and the type of work that we're doing isn't suited well to sitting down for 2 to 3 hour chunks for one topic, and then sitting down for another 2 to 3 hour chunk for another topic in the afternoon, and then hitting the grind the next day back into teaching full-time, bumper to bumper, without the chance to really very frequently roll up your sleeves and re-engage in that work. There is so much work going on right now in Williston. Some examples, just to name a few, include supporting the math best practice work that teachers are engaged in, aligning core math ideas with exit tasks. So this is work that teachers are doing on a daily and weekly basis. Middle level math assessment practice changes. So Tier 1 and Tier 2 collaboration around study guides, reteaching and reassessments. So when you think about what responsive teaching is being on top of a very tight feedback loop around teaching, assessing, looking at what those assessments say about where students are and what you're teaching, making adjustments, finding out where you need to double back for those teachers for those students who aren't firm with the learning, and constantly retooling and adjusting instruction and repeating that loop. So those are some examples. We are looking at entering into a new age next year of parent reporting that's standards-based, shifting from Jupyter grades into a jump rope system. Teachers will need regular time to be identifying and developing learning targets. As you know, Act 77 has teachers engaged, middle-level teachers engaged in personalized, and students engaged in developing and working with personalized learning plans. You've heard a lot in the last couple of years about next generation science standards. There's just an abundance of work, and the type of work that it is really points to a regular ability to come back in and re-engage. So the idea of having this regular span of time is really game-changing in terms of what teachers will be able to do with support of administrators, and we anticipate direct impact to instruction and direct impact to student learning. That's what we're most excited about this proposal. I know I didn't read verbatim all of the details, but what questions does the board have?
Did you guys look into alternative ways of getting that extra hour into the week? Like, what alternatives did you look into aside from shortening the school days?
Go ahead.
I can speak to that just at the building level. So what we've worked to do in the last 5 to 7 years in particular is really get creative where what it is now, it's not one teacher sitting down to do the work, it's multiple teachers teaching the same content areas sitting down to do the work together, because we want those common assessments as an outcome for students. So they may get there in a different way, but they all take a common assessment at the end to make sure that the learning that is supposed to happen has happened. So things that we've tried to get really creative with, we'll say, let's say there's a concert, which there is tomorrow. So we have some math teachers across different teams that won't go watch the concert. Instead, they will stay back and they will collaborate to work on, whatever assessment they're working on together. So it's kind of like borrowing and finding time wherever we could in creative ways. Faculty meeting time, we already use that way, where teachers are engaged in work, not just sitting and listening to, what the weekly announcements are. So we've tried to be really creative with the schedule, and take advantage of those opportunities in pockets. It's just not enough to sustain the whole system, as we move forward.
Has there been, instead of shortening the day, have you looked at whether the current contract allows for lengthening the day, or whether the union would be open to lengthening the day so that it doesn't happen at the children's expense? Because if I may just make a quick observation, it sounds like some of the things that Greg just mentioned, in my mind's eye, aren't just professional development, but it sounds like daily or regular work that needs to be accomplished, the assessment of the students, working with personal learning plans. When I think of professional development, I think about learning new curriculum, best practices, and so there seems to be both that are trying to be accomplished here.
Right. So we're using every minute of what's contractually allowed right now in terms of faculty meeting time. So that's currently the way it looks now. Any change in that would have to be negotiated. And in terms of the piece around the professional development, we are really in a different place in terms of here's new information you have to have. Here we're going to teach you, or we're going to deliver this new information to you. We've done a lot of that in the last 1.5 to 2 years. Now we're asking teachers to do different things in terms of their practice, and in terms of their instruction, and in terms of their responsiveness to the way they teach. And that type of thing, to do that implementation, requires more frequent touches on the ball. It's not the kind of thing where we don't want to come back and talk about, wait for 3 months to come back and talk about this and see how we're doing.
So what I've been wondering about is, I like to focus on communication, and I feel like this may have been something the leadership team has discussed, but from what I've heard from a handful of teachers, this is something they just learned about. It isn't something that's been rolling up and bubbling up that they've been asking for. And so I feel like a lot of the players that are impacted by this, is there a way that, that the start of, that thinking about this and talking about this could be processed in a broader way and involve more, parents and teachers and, the sports schedules, and think about how we can do this and not have it be something that needs to happen on such a short schedule? Because, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out as something where there's a lot of issues that are here for families and things like that. And we just moved away within the last decade from having a lot of partial days in our school system. And so to sort of move, back in that direction, where that was, sort of a relief for families to not have all these partial days, and now to have that every week, it just feels that it's a big impact on families. And I mean, this is, I've got a stack of them, you've read them probably too, so.
And I know the subgroup did look back at the partial day model as something, whether or not it was, and the clear direction was that wasn't something the community liked, that wasn't something that really supported the needs.
Right.
So that's why they didn't go in that direction.
Right, no, I'm not supporting that direction, I'm just saying that, even 1 hour, it's throwing a, it's a difficult thing for families to look at. There could be cost issues and things like that, so can we, have a community forum? Can we have a survey? Can we, I don't know, I mean, what is the process for this, I guess, is what I'm looking at.
Also, a lot of children participate in after-school activities, sports, and magic program. What's going to happen during that hour when those teachers who are running those programs will be asked to attend a in-service or education?
So we've already established that there'll be some kind of care and activity provided for students who aren't able to, who need to stay after for the 3 o'clock activities. if there are 3 o'clock activities. Students who are already in Imagine will simply be in Imagine
An hour
an hour earlier.
At additional cost to the families for that hour?
Not certain of that at this point. And for students who for students who need to stay for 3 o'clock, Imagine is also one option for that hour from 2 to 3. And as we do now with the after-school program, there are subsidy funds available for any situation where financial hardship prevents a family from accessing those supports.
Would you guys be able to support increased enrollment into the Imagine program for parents who, weren't able to pick up their kids until 3 o'clock?
Yes, they would add staff. The Imagine program would add staff. They've already indicated that they would do that. They have to keep a certain ratio of adults to students, so they would simply add staff.
What about increased involvement in 3 o'clock activities on a Tuesday afternoon? Suddenly everybody in the school is going to do a 3 o'clock activity. How would that look? Because if
Well-
you're going to offer coverage for that 1 hour for kids who do a 3 o'clock activity,
Well, the number of activities offered at 3 o'clock wouldn't change. So in other words, if you're on this team, you're on that team. If you're not on that team, we don't anticipate a big change in the number of things available at 3 o'clock for students. So that would be the same number of students who are involved in those things today.
But isn't the difference that if the faculty that support those programs are otherwise occupied with professional development, they're not going to be available? I mean, it'd be one thing if you had a cohort of coaches, let's say, for the sports teams that aren't predominantly based upon your faculty that could seamlessly take over and now have 2 o'clock practices instead of 3. But my sense is that's not really available.
Yeah, it's a mixture of teachers and outside people that are coaching. Imagine is not a program that teachers are facilitating. So the athletic piece, there certainly would be a piece there that we would look at and work with them to figure out.
What about Spark Academy?
So it's tier 3 Spark only that's currently
Tuesday.
offered on Tuesday afternoons, so it's a very small number. And, we work through that within the system now. I would envision we would do the same thing
Right.
for the 3 teachers that are engaged in that work on Tuesdays. It's a very small number. It's not like Thursday Spark Enrichment where it's a large number of teachers providing options for kids.
And to piggyback on that, to your point, Josh, we already work through now with the teachers who are involved in
Coaching.
with the 3 o'clock responsibility they have to be at a staff meeting.
So a couple questions from the emails that we received. Was there any thought or work to consider matching up the CVU schedule with the lower grade schedule to help those families that might be able to get coverage through older siblings?
Good question. I don't know do you know that?
I don't think so. I'm not 100% sure, Josh, but I do know the predominant reason around the late arrival for CVU students is to, align with developmental research around kids do their best work, adolescent kids do their best work later in the day. I don't know if there was a strong look at that.
So that's not a big selling point for me, just because if that's really important, then we should be having a later start high
Every
school every day, like South Burlington or other area school. I mean, if that's, if you want to follow research, you follow it every day of the week and not just, oh, it's Wednesday, I get to sleep late, and, I don't know, that didn't go anywhere with me in reading through that argument.
And then another question that was in the emails had to do with the impact on the Triple E program. That 1 hour could be a significant chunk of their day.
Carter responded to that.
I believe Carter, there was some correspondence about that today that Carter's involved in.
I didn't see it.
Him and I had a brief conversation today. He told me it'd be about a 5% difference in time, and then it would need a closer look in terms of what could be done to mitigate that.
So Triple E usually has 11 hours a week. In the afternoon, it's 11:45 to 2:30. And the new schedule would have the kids getting on the bus at 2 instead of, well, they'd be leaving the classroom at 2 instead of 2:30. So that's half an hour a week that they'd be losing. It wouldn't be the full hour like other kids would be seeing. So half an hour of 11 hours is only 5%, which is where Carter got that number from. So it would impact them, but to a lesser degree.
I appreciate that explanation.
So if you're taking a full hour out of the student's day on Tuesday, those students are following classes, so they move from classroom to classroom to classroom. So essentially you're taking one class out a week, essentially. So how are they going to make up what they're missing in that class? Because if you add 4 days back in, they would probably, like, they're not just going to focus on that one class, they'll follow their regular schedule.
That's a good question. No, we would have a schedule that would look different that day and alternate, so it wouldn't impact the same class each time, because that would be important that it didn't.
So, for example, if you had 8 classes a day, typically, you would have a rotating schedule where you would lose, one class, a second class, a third class over 8 weeks.
Yeah, it won't be quite that simple, because we don't operate on a set, every curriculum area doesn't have the same amount of set time.
Yep.
Some do, but most don't. So it won't be quite that simple, but the rotational piece would be the model we'd look at.
I'd like to see kind of what that looks like, just from how you move the kids in this new model.
I also have some more questions surrounding like the committee, like you don't need to like mention names, but like what collection of people did you have involved in the committee, the lead committee who put together this recommendation? And I think we have a decent idea of what they looked at. If there's anything we haven't discussed that they looked at that would be worth mentioning, that would be good to know, or things that happened in the past that we haven't thought of here, just so we can try and get as complete a picture as possible.
The makeup of the committee was a cross-section of principals in the SU. There was also, I think, a CSSU administrator. Bob, do you happen to know who that representative was?
Do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can't give you too much detail because I wasn't one of those people. But what I can tell you is that they did report out, and what you're seeing in the CULT report is the core of that information, that they looked at what we did previously.
Yeah.
They looked at the professional learning we're engaged in now. They looked carefully at what they thought was best for bringing instruction to the next level. They looked at what other neighboring, other districts are doing in the area.
What are those districts again? I couldn't remember.
Burlington is one. Let's see.
Chittenden.
South Burlington, Chittenden East, and Rutland.
Chittenden East.
Okay, so it wasn't any already in our SU. Okay.
Right. No, nothing in
No,
Chittenden
because this is an
South.
SU proposal.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
So those 3 school districts, just so I understand it, they have one day of the week where their day is shortened in order to accommodate professional development?
I'm not clear that from this, I'm not getting that it's the same exact proposal, because all it says are examples who have altered their professional development approach to include some form of frequent early release or late start days. I don't know, I couldn't see that it was like a definite model of weekly.
I would agree with Karen.
Yeah.
In previous conversations that I've had with Elaine, I believe that Chittenden East went to this type of schedule last year, so they're fairly new into it. So they went through this process about 2 years ago and are now in full implementation. And another comment that came up was that I can contribute to, I don't know if it helps the discussion or not, but the alternate days were early release for CBU is going to be on a Wednesday, or on late start on a Wednesday, and early release for the K through 8s is on Tuesdays. Had to do more with logistics around existing scheduling than anything else. So I know it was looked at, but the league team didn't feel like they could make it work on the same day across both school systems.
So we, just going back to an earlier comment you said where per the contract, we're kind of maxed out with, admin hours or meeting hours.
Faculty meeting hours.
Yeah. Has there been any thought just to, because they have, 3 or 4 days where they're in service now, the teachers?
Yes.
Has there been any thought just to have those as, days off for the children and the teachers and then tack on an additional hour each week to achieve this type of training that you're looking for? Just seeing if all options were looked at.
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
And I don't know if contractually,
Oh yeah, just asking.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to come back to something that Josh, just this point around professional development and versus teacher planning and prep, that's kind of simmering a little bit for me. And I think an important distinction to make is that a lot of the work that we're asking teachers to do is collaborative in nature and requires teammates to have time together, requires teams to be able to have cross-team conversations, and is not the kind of work that can be replicated at odd hours of a teacher's day that I would call weekly teacher planning, individual teacher planning. This is deep collaborative work, and the collaborative nature of it is a very key point that I feel like I lost when I initially answered that question.
Good point. So a question for the administrators and/or Kevin, what is the process here? This is a discussion item. Is this coming back as an action item next month? What are?
So what's, the way I understand it is this is definitely up for discussion at all boards this evening. So it's not just us, but all of the boards. And it will be up for discussion at the SU board after this. It will come up for action for all boards in April. So we have between now and then to continue the discussion and make a decision. And we will take action in April.
I have a couple more discussion items. So did we, going back to what Brendan said, do we have the details of the contract? So I don't know if we need this nitty gritty, but for instance, teachers have to work, or they're in their contract, it's that they'll work at, 35 hours a week, pulling that out of thin air. Please don't quote me on that one. Or do we know that sort of structure? Because to Brendan's point of taking those 3 days that are currently in-service days and just everybody gets off those days and then spreading the time out seems to make a lot of sense, but I don't know if we're not contractually allowed to do that. So that's one question that I would have for this group that put this recommendation together. Another question that I would have for them, have we looked at lessons learned from any of these other places that have done some form of frequent professional development? Like, are we about to walk off the cliff because, Chitty says, oh my gosh, this is terrible, it's not working for us for this, and this reason? Like, if they have lessons learned that we can preview before we experience the same mistakes or pitfalls, that would be great. I don't know if we can get that, but...
Well, there's been some, I know at our meeting, they talked a lot about Chittenden East and what they've done and the path they've been on, and a lot of that was shared in the report out that we were part of.
So that it's been fairly positive, the feedback then from that, or from their implementation of it?
Yeah, now that's the only one I've heard specifics on.
Who was the feedback?
But I wasn't on that committee either, so okay. We split up into different committees and we just happened to be on different ones.
Right.
Well, are they doing weekly, I guess? I mean, if it's positive,
Yeah.
I mean, is anyone implementing something like what we're proposing? Because it would be really helpful to hear how that has gone and how, how has it worked with all the after-school programs and things like that with families, and what kinds of,
Yep.
other things have been,
Right. Yeah, let me explain again the structure with which we all work together. We meet regularly as a lead group, and there are significant topics unfolding in a variety of areas. And certain of us have attached ourselves to one committee or another, but we get regular updates on the work that is done in each committee and feel some degree of consensus that the committee's work should move forward. So we're buying into what they presented, but unfortunately you're looking at 3 people that weren't physically on that committee. And yes, they did look at those other areas who have already implemented, and speaking for them, the results have been very favorable from a professional development standpoint, or otherwise you wouldn't have seen the recommendation here coming forward. But what might work is that if there are specific questions that get really at that detailed work, we by all means can take those down and get answers as kind of frequently asked questions to the committee members that actually did the work, so you're clear on what was done.
Well, I think it'd be interesting to see a matrix that said, Chittenden East has, this is what they're implementing, and, this is what South Burlington's implementing, and, just to get a sense. And maybe if one of them is implementing what Chittenden South is proposing, let's get a little bit more information on them.
So
from
details
them.
on the 3 early adopters.
Yeah.
Yep.
The 4, I think there's
There are
4.
4.
There's Burlington, South Burlington, Rutland. I mean, those are big
Chittenden
urban,
East, yeah.
urban areas too, so.
And in particular, so if there's one that's working really, really well, why aren't we doing that particular model? Like, why are we choosing something different? If we are, with just more detail on what's currently out there, just so we don't have to repeat other people's mistakes.
Well, and I guess just one last thing for me is if we are entering a contract negotiation period and is it worth us holding off on any changes in our professional development and incorporating that into negotiations on contract so that maybe additional time gets added into the contract and this doesn't impact families in as much as it is an additional hour every week for staff. So,
I just want to strongly echo and concur with those comments.
Likewise.
So folks, in the interest of time, I want to make sure that we allow some time for public input. I have a few agenda items that we need to resolve this evening also beyond this. So if we need to discuss this further, we can talk about holding another meeting or holding another forum. But at this point, I think I would, unless anybody has a serious objection, I'd like to turn it over to public input on this specific subject.
Kevin, would it be helpful for me to just take the gavel for a few minutes at this point since?
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
All right, so at this point in the meeting, we're going to open the meeting up for public participation and comment. I hate to put hard time limits, but we got a half an hour to get through a lot of an agenda, so I would ask people to keep their comments to 2 or 3 minutes. And certainly, we've received a lot of emails and communications. I, for one, am reading those. I suspect everyone else is here, so if you need more time, write us or give us a call and bend our ear. Okay? So I've got a sign list of 7 folks. Does everyone here who signed in want to speak? Can I? So why don't I start on this end? We'll just work down the line. If you could just identify yourself for the record and
Sure.
and share your
I'm
comments.
Paula LeBlanc. I'm not sure that I need the questions answered. I just want to pose them. If professional development defined by the Department of Education and what is that definition? Because I question if Chittenden South Supervisory Union or Williston School District has the ability to actually, not knowing what the definition is, has the ability to make that more about collaboration and checking in and assessments. Because just to my non-knowing ears, it sounds like we're changing that direction. And I've never been a part of any of these. The school year is going to change to year-round, and we're going to go in the summers, and I have no idea if that's something that's just an urban myth or if it's ever going to be on the table, and if it is, do we talk about that? Do we make more than one change at the same time, or just do everything all at once, because these do impact families? I know you talked about subsidizing families if they have the added expense, but there's families that might not qualify for such a thing, but still have the added expense. My last thing, I do want to point out that there are a lot of kids or families that are split, and there are a lot of court orders that are based around our school year, whether that's the long Thanksgiving week and the every other vacation thing, that a lot of people are gonna back in court because of such a change. So it really goes way beyond the walls of our school.
All right, thank you. Would you like to give a few words?
Well, I just wanted to echo and concur with the comments that I think it was Karen who mentioned that, oh my gosh, no, I just lost my train of thought. That I do think that hearing how other schools that have implemented this, how it's working for them, what challenges, or maybe it was Amanda who said that, what challenges did they encounter, to really work with people who've been there before.
Thank you.
Sure, so I'll try to keep it brief and just make the points. I can understand why, from a professional development perspective, you'd want to do this. Having the more regular intervals makes a lot of sense. But it seems to me, and I'll be a little bit hard and blunt, this is, I don't know what the real implementation schedule is, but this seems completely half-baked. Doesn't seem ready to do or to vote on. I completely can't understand how we're going to punish the students, is my view on it, where they don't get their after-school activities and then all the burden goes on to the parents. We're in a negotiation year, or the negotiation's coming up, so just rolling it into that seems to make a lot more sense. Having read the contract, you legally can't even do this. It's a change to the contract. So if you wanted to implement Brennan's idea, that is as much a change as what you're suggesting. Having read the contract, it's very clearly defined as their in-service days. So if you're gonna make the swap one way, you can make the swap another way. There's probably a path for both things and everything can be done. But again, it really doesn't seem well thought through beyond the concept that having more regular professional development makes a lot of sense and it probably has a lot of benefits to the students and the teachers. That's a great idea. I can understand how the committee comes up with it. But the implementation, it seems like what I've read in social media that we're kind of rushing this. I've heard that this is the one opportunity for discussion and then there's going to be a vote and then it's going to be done. So again, I think Karen's suggestion, I'm getting the names correctly here, of just saying, hey, this probably is what we want to do. Probably is a good thing, but let's just implement it through the next contract negotiations. Let's get more teacher input on it. How do they want it? From a parent's perspective, I'd say this sounds great. If we're going to do it right now, let's push it in. Let's do it Friday afternoons after school. At the end, the teachers can all meet then, which I suspect won't be popular with them. Let's do it first thing in the morning. Let's do it from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. on Tuesdays. Probably not popular with the teachers, but rolling it out quickly, don't agree with completely at all. Makes sense for why we want to do it, but the implementation I really think has to be better thought through. Doesn't seem, and it's not to be, well, it is to be very frank, yeah, that's my view.
All right, thank you. Aaron?
Yes. Hi. So I just want to reiterate, I really appreciate all of the discussion and the comments that have been around the impact of different release times on different days of the week on working families. Both my wife and I work. And while we do take advantage of the Imagine program, and I think we actually would be covered in this particular case, I know a lot of families don't have a situation like this. And having an hour early dismissal one day of the week would be very disruptive and tough to deal with. I heard two different numbers for the number of additional school days. Was it 3 or 4 being proposed?
It is 4. I misspoke the first time.
It is 4, okay. And this would be a 1 hour per week early dismissal. And it was roughly 36 weeks per school year, so
it would be 30,
36 hours, but we're adding 24.
So it would be 32 because we're, there are some weeks that are 3-day weeks.
Okay.
So it's 32. We do know that. It's 32 weeks and it's 28 hours. A teacher day is 7 hours. A student day is considered 7 hours.
Well, 7 hours, but there's about an hour of non-instruction time in the day as well. So I sort of count a school day as 6 hours of student engagement time
Right.
with
But the
lunch
time
and
with
recess.
the teachers is 7.
Sure. From a contractual standpoint, I agree with your number. Has there been any discussion of the additional cost to the taxpayers of implementing this program? Adding days, adds staff days, it adds transportation days. What sort of numbers are we looking at from a cost?
The shifts in the days being added for staff will not have any cost implications in terms of salaries or that? We're under contract with.
Well, I understand that for faculty, but staff, is that going to be separate?
Same number of contract days, that won't change.
What about the Imagine program having to start an hour earlier? Would that have any costs?
It could have costs associated with families who are enrolled.
But it wouldn't have, would it have cost, I mean, as taxpayers, it'd have cost to families, does it have
Yeah,
cost?
well, that was my question, Mark, is TAs, buses, custodial staff, we're adding 4 days for that.
No, those people are in the buildings on those days anyway.
So we're running the buses with students that are
Not
empty?
buses, but
Okay,
custodians.
so the cost is non-zero, but I'd be interested to understand what that number is.
I'd have to look at that. He's talking about the transportation costs for the,
Right.
for additional student days.
Thank you for your comments.
Thanks.
And Deanna?
Yeah, I just wanted to, it's kind of a silly little point, but I go to Rice and we have mass every month, which takes an hour out of the school day. And we get like pretty close to nothing done, and at like a high school. So I don't know what that's gonna do to the middle school kids, because, I mean, I don't know. I don't remember what you said about like if you were gonna shorten the classes, if you were just gonna straight up take one out. But they're probably gonna be more distracted than they would be on a normal day. And so I don't know if they're even gonna I don't know if it's gonna be worth it in the end if they're gonna because the point is to teach them better, right? But if they're losing an hour and then not really focusing the entire day because they get out early, once a week, I don't know if that's gonna end up being worth it in the end.
If I could just to echo or continue on that point, to go to a shifting schedule where there's not a regular routine for the kids, again, I think it lowers what the kids get, but yes, indeed, it is probably better for teachers' professional development. The more regular professional development makes sense, but again, it's at the impact to the kids and to the parents, and yeah.
All right, well, folks,
Just sort of something that came up to me. I feel like if this is a proposed change, I guess I'd like to see a financial number associated with it for costs, because any other proposal we get for a program, in these tight budget times, we would see, a cost. I don't want us to sit here and say, let's, do this and,
Right.
and then we have a cost that's associated that was unexpected. So any other proposal, you'd get it costed out. What's the impact on every school district in the supervisory union of something like this? And it would be evaluated as part of a whole picture.
That's a good point.
And a read from a contract perspective, because I don't think this can be done in the current contract.
So I'm going to close public comment at this stage so that we can move on with the rest of our meeting. But I want to thank everyone for coming out. We realize these are important issues. And again, we are all reachable by email. Our telephone numbers are published in the Observer, so feel free because your input is important. So thank you for taking your time out today and driving out to Heinsberg. So thank you.
Yes, thank you guys very much. Thank you.
And you can stay for the rest of our meeting. You don't have to.
I would love to stay with my 8-year-old.
All right. So Kevin, do you want the gavel back?
Sure, and just to help me out if I cut in, moving along here, but why don't we continue, since we started discussion matters, why don't we close them out? So we're gonna,
Can I just, on this professional development calendar piece, we did have in our packet a calendar that's already been done up for us to look at for the next school year that includes these professional development, that the proposal is a done deal.
For discussion.
For discussion, I understand that. So now, let's say that the discussion goes the same way in all the other board meetings and it's tabled for a while. So we then now need to get a new calendar. When are we going to let everybody know what the calendar is for the next school year? I feel like we're pushing it out.
We could do that pretty easily because you can look at the calendar and say, pull out 4 days.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it won't be.
So we don't have to have another discussion on a calendar next month and then we don't act until May?
Oh, no.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure
It
we
would
weren't delaying.
it would be kind of look at the calendar you have this year and imagine just looking at a new calendar and plugging in the very same dates.
Okay.
Real
So-
quick,
We just thought it would be important for you, for the discussion, to see what the calendar would look like with the 4 additional days.
Speaking of the calendar, I don't know if people can bring it up, but are March 6th and 7th incorrectly colored in blue?
I had that
No,
same question.
they are not. Those would be two.
Because the winter break schedule doesn't include them in, right below it. It says March 1st through the 3rd.
And it's the 6th and the 7th, that would be an unusual winter break. because
So it's the week before that's the.
Yeah, I think that's what it was supposed to be, but the 6th and 7th, I think, are accidentally blue, and they're
Let me
supposed to be
look at it.
yellow, and I was really liking.
I don't have it up, but my take was that that vacation is always a lead up to town meeting day.
Right, so town meeting day, we would meet on the night of the 6th,
6th and the
but
7th.
now we're also going to be closed on the 7th, according to this calendar.
No, both be student days. In this calendar, Monday and Tuesday would both be student days.
Okay, all right, so
So
they
it doesn't
just
look
are,
right in the calendar.
so they
I have
shouldn't
to
be
look at
blue
it.
then.
Yeah, March 6th and 7th need to be yellow, that's all.
I know, I noticed that same.
Okay.
notice.
I looked at this for a while.
Oh, yeah, it looks like they look like they're both off, and actually they both should be in.
Okay.
The text at the bottom also didn't mention it.
Right.
That's why I thought either the text was
Right.
wrong or the coloring was wrong.
Yep.
Josh, can you
Sorry
pass
about
the
that.
list of audience speakers around? Do you still have that? Thank you.
Okay, should we continue, folks?
Yep.
Subconscious policies, so, for new board members, as was mentioned previously, we do a kind of a 2-month cycle where we have policies that we have in the discussion area, and then, next month we will, take action on these and approve them. So this is the time where, if we had a rep that was coming from the policy committee, that rep would, speak to these policies, highlight any major changes that we should be aware of. You're also provided these in pre-reads, so the expectation is that you take a look at them before now. So with all of that, is there any discussion on any of these particular policies? Questions you need to know about?
I had one question about the student medication policy. My question is, are school medical staff consulted about these policies, and do they review them? Because they're mentioned in the policy as far as being responsible for, the administration of medications or the storage of them. And so just making sure that we've had our nursing staff in our different schools look at the policy and see if there's anything they would suggest tweaking. So I didn't know if that was part of the review or not. So,
That would be.
Who's your policy rep?
Well, it was Kevin Brochu, who'll be elected again tonight.
it's Amanda and Brendan going forward.
So there'll be a policy meeting between now and your next meeting?
March 23rd.
Right, yeah.
Oh,
So you want to make sure that question is asked,
Okay.
exactly
Got it.
to what extent professionals
Yeah.
have been involved in the clarification and development of
Writing down.
Student medication
that
policy.
student medication
Okay.
policy.
So I have several comments or questions. One is, it wasn't clear to me, and I did review the policies, whether these are adoption of as-is language or readoption of as-is language, or whether there've been modifications. There were no red line changes that were presented.
These were all, 4 of them were no changes, adopted with no changes, and 1 was no changes waiting for legislative action, so there were no changes in any of them.
So thank you for that clarification. On that, the issue of professional input with regards to the search and seizure policies, has local counsel been involved in reviewing these policies for updates? Does anyone know?
Again, I'm not on the policy committee, so I'm not going to answer that question, but that's exactly the kind of thing that goes back to the committee. And you make sure they're answered.
I'm pretty sure they have, from what I've read, but I'll double check.
And then diving a little bit deeper, as it pertains to the policy on searches of students that may involve disrobing, I am concerned about, and now I'm going to dive into some legal concepts, but the burden of suspicion or the level of suspicion to justify that level of intrusive search is a reasonableness standard, which is a pretty permissive standard on the continuum of suspicion. And I think before a student is asked to have their privacy invaded into a search that would involve disrobing, that there should be a higher burden of suspicion, not a reasonableness standard, but a probable cause standard, which would be more close to a 50-50, a more likely than not standard. So I would ask for a more heightened level of scrutiny or suspicion before you ask a student or place a student in that position.
And then these policies, the search and seizure in particular, brought up for me this whole issue of the handbook, because they talk about that you're given, parents are given the handbook at the beginning of the year and students. And I don't know that any of us are physically given a handbook anymore, except we're given a link or we're told that it's accessible. And so I feel like we need to make that clear or we need to be clear in spelling out where it's available, because we don't actually have a parent sign off, I don't think, required, that you've looked at it, and maybe we want to look at something like that. You've looked at the policies and you understand them, or, like you would as an employee when you read an employee handbook. So, but we don't get that hard copy anymore
Yeah.
where you're, so.
And I'm gonna email you too, just to make sure I captured your questions correctly.
So those were all my comments.
Yep.
So I assume we're set with policy discussion?
Mhm.
So let's move on to next article submissions for Board's Corner, communications. Well, we certainly have some topics we could choose to discuss, but I'll take suggestions from the floor.
Well, I say this with some tongue-in-cheek, but in half seriousness, whether we should be communicating about the calendar
Yeah.
changes. I'm not sure the best way to go about that, but it seems to me this has already touched a nerve. We probably want to make sure the community is well aware of this.
Well, and I think we need to see what's happening at other board meetings and what happens after tonight, sort of what the decisions are.
Yeah, I have a suggestion to that. I agree with what Karen said. We need to kind of understand where we stand within the greater community. And if in fact we feel like we need to have more communications with our community, perhaps our article submission could round about offering a community forum. It's something that maybe we want to take some extra time to do an extra meeting. We can focus specifically on this, a meeting in Williston to allow parents to come listen and understand better what the proposal is. We can take that as further input towards our action next month.
One quick question, this is maybe really out there. Have we ever done any Facebook meetings?
Any what?
Okay, so you can basically tell people we're meeting on Facebook, and then everybody gets there at 8 o'clock or whatever, and you just type messages. It's all written down then, and then people just say what they have to say. You can guide it by saying, this is a comment that we got, feedback, or this is an update, feedback, or something like that. So it's not people physically have to go someplace, because you can do a Facebook meeting at home while your kids are screaming in the background and they're eating dinner or whatever. It's a way for people to get together without having to physically be there or physically send a representative or something like that. And I don't know if that's really weird, but people do it a lot now.
It's different enough. If the board chooses to head that direction, I would want Elaine and I to explore whether that's possible legally.
Okay.
And what the pros and cons would be relative to inclusion and exclusion.
Because you have to be on Facebook, I know.
Right.
That
So-
sounds weird.
So I wouldn't want you to jump there overnight.
No, I'm
Give
just
us a
throwing it
minute or two. I think if I could grab a moment for process, Kevin, I think what may work is this conversation or some variant is happening in 4 other places tonight. Probably what the best process would be to allow the topic to come back to Elaine and her staff. We'll discuss and reflect with Lee on what, given the input we've gotten both from you as board members and from others, is there a change in direction or process necessary? And get back to you quickly enough that we try not to compromise the approval looming out there in mid-April for some sort of calendar. But if you don't mind, before you guys set in place what you're gonna print, how you're gonna distribute it, leave it in our hands for at least 24 hours.
Well, and I was going to suggest that as important as the calendar is and just in opening that up for a community forum, I think the facilities piece is equally important, if not more important, in some ways of, you know, getting the community engaged in hearing about what's going on with our school and what our school needs are. And so if we're going to have a forum, have it be multi-purpose.
Yeah.
And have it be these important topics we need you to, hear about. And we want to bring to you more information. And we have it in Williston. But that's just because we're going to want to do something like that for Act 46 as well as we look at a consolidation thing, so.
I see the virtue of trying to take limited time and making the most of it. I also see pitfalls of creating too much diversity when we need focus. And I don't know how that plays itself out, but that would be how I would want to balance that.
Yeah.
Okay, so, Bob, I'm comfortable with your suggestion. I just want you aware of the time constraints we're under. To make some
Very much aware of those.
Yeah, I figured. Okay.
So just, Kevin, it's almost 5 of 7.
Yeah, I know, we've got so I have a thought on, my suggestion is that we quickly finish up our discussion, move to action, have a quick discussion around policies that were pulled out and the one action item we have, take action on those. And then, unfortunately, I think we need to table the facilities discussion. It is at minimum a 20-minute discussion, in my opinion. Bob and Greg, we're going to have to regroup and decide whether or not we need to hold a special meeting between now and April for that, or if we can hold off till April.
Was that last part? If we can.
Hold off till April.
Yeah, the question will be whether we need to meet again as a board to discuss this, to take action on in April, or whether we can hold off, discuss in April, and take action after that.
Kevin, my idea might be less appropriate as I give it a day to think on, but right at the moment, I'm thinking what might work is if the board's willing to meet with Greg and I sometime between now and the April meeting. We very much wanted to get you all in for a facility tour. I think we couple the facility walkthrough and tour with 20 minutes of discussion in an attempt to get you back on track to actually consider something for action in April, if that's okay.
I agree.
Okay.
And
Let's see if we can keep the wheels on that.
If I may just recommend that we want to have our consultants at least one, if not both of those meetings. It seems to me questions will arise, and I know you all have done a lot of great work, but having a representative from the engineering firm may be important to that discussion.
The only hesitation is if Greg and I bring all the consultants, it's not 20 minutes, because none of them.
Maybe the project manager?
We can bring the short list. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Let's approach it that way then. So, very quickly, is there any discussion that we had on post-vote reflection? Vote passed. Any other questions?
Post-vote discussion.
Okay.
Yay.
We'll table facilities for another meeting where we'll put together with a tour. Let's move on to action. Why don't we start with what we pulled out of the consent agenda first, and then we'll take action on the nomination. So we pulled bus discipline and transportation out.
Yeah, so just two questions respectively, just on the bus discipline. The policy read that if in an extreme circumstance and safety is involved, the bus driver can drop off a kid presumably anywhere on the bus route per procedure. and I didn't know what the procedures were, and thought it might be significant to know what those were. So that was my concern. That seemed like a broad authority. Sounds like that authority is constrained, but I didn't know what the constraints were. So I felt uncomfortable supporting that without the context of the procedure. With regards to transportation and mandatory, it seemed to me, and I support the concept, that we are going to obligate ourselves to ensure that all children are transported to the school, but was mindful of the board discussion that we had as we looked at options for budget cuts, that we might cut back on transportation within a mile radius of the school. And if we lock ourselves into this policy, are we locking ourselves into a potential budget fix? You know, if presented with bad choices, I'm not saying I support cutting back transportation, but if faced with a worse choice, you know, I might want to have that option, and I don't want to lock ourselves in. So
I think the policy language, because we discussed this policy last month, and I think it doesn't say that we're required to transport, right?
It just takes out a section that said required by law.
Right.
Or something to that effect. So I think it's actually saying it's not required.
Right, that's what I thought. That's what I remembered from our discussion. I don't know about that.
So I wasn't here for the discussion. My initial read, and I didn't read it 3 or 4 times to parse the language, was that we are committing ourselves to providing transportation for children within our school district. And so that seemed inconsistent with the potential option. So I guess in light of the time, I'd like to table the action items for those 2 policies so that we can get the procedures and take a harder look on the bus policy to make sure it doesn't tie our hands. I don't think these are critical policies for the operation of the school right now.
Second.
That's fine.
Okay, so noted and tabled. Karen, can we move on to the 2 that you asked to pull out of consent?
Sure. I just didn't understand, I don't remember from last year, this annual approval of the supervisory union newspaper of choice. So is this what do we use 7 days for? Do we advertise in 7 days? What do we post in 7 days, I guess? Because I've never seen anything that we've posted in 7 days, so.
There's a number of legal notices. Best example is warnings for your meetings are required to be posted regularly before the meeting, and they're required to be posted in the school's identified newspaper of choice.
Okay.
So you should, if Sandy and I and Elaine are good, see this item every year at about this time.
So-
Unless Sandy and I find out that once you've named your newspaper of choice, you don't need to revisit the decision. And so you have to establish which newspaper you're using.
But we have to have one for the whole supervisory union?
This is a similar motion for all school districts
Okay.
within the SU.
So we wouldn't have our Williston board meetings warned in the Williston Observer ever, is what I'm wondering.
Not necessarily. I think this is a bit of a legal distinction. I think we need to have a newspaper of choice, but I think we're also required to post it locally, and I think we post it in the town hall and somewhere else. I'm not quite sure, but
Bob, would you agree that if we passed this policy, it would not preclude this board from asking that notices be done in the Williston Observer on a regular basis?
That's correct. This
Okay.
satisfies
Okay.
the need to
Okay.
have
All right.
legally advertised your meetings and other obligations of
Okay.
the district in a paper of general circulation.
Okay.
And we're recommending you use 7 days because it's about half the price and twice as many people read it.
Okay.
But,
Yeah, no, I just
okay,
was.
this is the legal requirement.
Okay. So do we need to vote on this? I mean, it's 7 o'clock. I'm feeling like we're,
we can take it. We can vote on it here real quickly. But why don't we discuss your any questions you have on 9.5, which was the truant officer?
so on this one, I guess I'm just these truant officers aren't necessarily the individuals who are going to be calling the home and saying, is such and such coming to school? And so I know our policies say or their designee, but the state law doesn't say or their designee. So I guess does our policy,
The action item here doesn't do justice to the system that's in place
Yeah,
around truancy.
right.
Yeah.
Your school regularly is involved in a sequenced communication with families to bring kids into school. And when issues rise to a certain occasion, they enlist the help of people outside the school.
Yeah.
Legally, we're required as a school to name a truant officer.
Right, okay.
And have some first name and second name attached to it.
Yep.
So that's all this
Yeah, no,
does.
I just-
But there's a countywide
There's a
County,
countywide,
Chittenden
practice
County, yeah.
with truancy that's
Yeah.
in the last 5 or 6 years working far more effectively than it did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
So with that, and in the interest of time, can I have a motion to approve the annual newspaper of choice and the annual appointment of a truant officer?
So moved.
Second.
If there's no further discussion, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. In the interest of time, can I have a motion to approve the nomination of the 7-8 language arts teacher for Harbor House?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
My understanding is she's in this role today,
correct,
right?
yes, that is
So-
correct.
And she's been, was she temporarily appointed to fill a position, a vacancy?
She was temporary, she's filling a one-year position. She shifted over from being a special educator.
Right.
You remember we had a death of a
Right,
teacher this
right.
fall, and up until that point, it was a one-year position.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. That brings us to a quick recap on next meeting dates. Right now, we're set for the 26th of April for our next regular meeting. The CSSU board meets right before that at 5 p.m. I have a board chairs meeting on the 7th at 8 a.m. New board members, highly recommend you attend this meeting on the 6th. It's very, very helpful.
Kevin, can I do a?
He didn't do his consent.
Yeah, can you move back up for just a minute and entertain a motion to pass the consent agenda?
As modified.
Those of you who have been with me for a few years, how many times do I do that? So, thank you, Bob. Let's go right back over to consent agenda. Now, we pulled out and tabled 9.3. So, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with 9.3 removed?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And just as a point real quick, consent agenda doesn't have discussion, so that's why we pull stuff out to discuss.
So,
now-
but the code of conduct, do we all need to sign that?
Yes, I have
Okay.
documents for your signatures, so
Okay.
before you run physically down the hall, if you could visit these 3 pages of paper, that would be great.
That would be very good. And as such, I move that we adjourn this meeting.